I find the reasoning for an FTA rather unclear, if not dubious. I mean, I've talked to people as to why they favor an FTA, and there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of naivete about what FTAs are about. A free trade agreement has very little to do with trade these days. You know, in fact, Malaysia is a relatively open economy, and so is the US. So it's not really about trade. Much of free trade agreements now have to do with the other aspects: strengthening of intellectual property rights, extending certain kinds of special privileges, and so on and so forth. The relationship of bilateral, plurilateral, as well as regional trade agreements to the multilateral trade system is also a very complex thing, and many of these other arrangements actually undermine multilateral trade agreement. When you talk to the people who advocate free trade agreement, whether it's with the US or with any other society, very often they actually think that it's principally about trade, and actually it reflects some naivete. I understand that there's a bit of a debate going on in the government, in the cabinet. That's, I think, a very healthy thing. Some of the main critics of the free trade agreement have gone into Parliament, and that might be good, but it may also pose problems, because it may make the issue and the debate much more partisan than it already is. I mean, for example, Dr. Mahathir has raised very, very serious doubts about not only the proposed US free trade agreement, but also the free trade agreement with Japan, which was a country he fostered very close relations with. So I think one needs to begin to think about the actual gains which are likely to be derived from such agreements. And simply on a pragmatic note, I think it's important to remember that you now have a Democratic Congress in the US. Bush no longer has fast-track authority. The Colombian free trade agreement still has not gone through Congress, and it's unlikely to get through Congress. And Colombia is a far more important ally of the United States than Malaysia is. So the likelihood of getting a free trade agreement through is very small. Another factor I think to consider is that the country which Malaysia seemed to be competing with, and this is a silly type of competition to get a free trade agreement with the US, was actually Thailand. And in Thailand, you know, ever since the coup, there has been a suspension of the whole effort to have a free trade agreement. So, and the minister who was most gung-ho about having a free trade agreement with the US is no longer there. So I think this is a very good opportunity to have the government rethink the whole matter, and it's very important that all parties concerned not make this a partisan issue. There should be a debate over the free trade agreement without making it a partisan issue. Well, as I said, I don't follow developments very closely. I think it is very easy to blame the leader of the party or the leader of the government for the poor electoral result. But one should also think very carefully as to, if he had not been there, whether the result might have been actually worse. Because I think personally, the Prime Minister still has a great deal of credibility as a person. I think many of the people who voted against the Barisan Nasional did not see themselves as voting against Prime Minister Abdullah. So I think if this is supported by survey information, which I think it is, because I've talked to people who do some of these surveys, not necessarily published surveys, but Um, as far as I can tell, most of the disaffection had nothing to do with the Prime Minister himself. The disaffection with the Prime Minister comes from people within the government and within the party. Yeah? But it did not translate into the electoral result. The disaffection, the public disaffection which translated into the electoral results had much more to do with the credibility of the ruling coalition and of the government as a whole, rather than with the Prime Minister. So if one thinks this through, it may well be the case that the Barisan Nasional may have done even worse without Abdullah being able to salvage the situation for the coalition owing to his personal standing. I'm not suggesting that people necessarily see him as the greatest leader of the country or greatest prime minister or greatest leader of the, but I think there is a sense that of at least his personal integrity, which I think in a sense may well have helped the Barisan Nasional's election performance. And so the consequent, I mean, there's a French expression, you know, after après moi le déluge, you know, the sense that, you know, without him, it could well have been much worse. So, if this is true, I mean, as I said, I don't really follow, and it's a superficial impression from having talked to various people, you know, and obviously many of the people I talk to are not necessarily his fans, you know, but I think this is broadly acknowledged.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No.